Thank you, Nick. I've been telling everyone who listens to me that this is the first time I've ever been inside George Monarch's school. The reason that's significant is that I was actually brought up in Walthamstow. I went to William McGuffey and then William Morris School, and one of the things we never did was come to George Monarch's, because at that time this was a school that was dominated by the white community, and as Asians it was off limits for various reasons. We came to the swimming pool regularly, but you never came here. So it's amazing to see the change that has taken place in the intervening 30 years. And hopefully part of what I want to do today is to talk about how we bring about change and how we make sure that the change we bring about is really effective. I always try to start presentations with a joke of some form, and I've actually struggled to think about what could possibly be funny in this instance. But I'll tell you a story about an experience I had, which I've started to see in different ways as I've got older. Less than a mile away from here, I was beaten up by 6 skinheads, one of whom stabbed me. After recovering, I went back to school, and the head of sixth form, who'd known me for about 6 years by then, came up to see me and asking me about that experience and what had happened and so on. And ultimately he said to me, "Didn't you have any warning that something was going to happen?" And after thinking for a couple of seconds, I said, "I remember somebody shouting 'Paki,' but because it had been such a regular experience at that time, I really didn't pay much attention to it. I certainly didn't see it as a warning that something was about to happen. So I didn't do anything. I didn't even turn around, if I recall." In telling this to the head of sixth form, he turned to me and said, "But you're not a Pakistani, are you?" And there I was, a 17-year-old, having to explain to the head of sixth form what racism really is about. Racism isn't about logic. It isn't about thinking through. It isn't about stopping somebody and saying, "I want to beat up a Paki today. Are you a Paki?" No, it is about ignorance. It is about seeing somebody not for who they are, but for what they represent. And I think that's the origins of hate. For me, it is about creating a situation where we actually don't see the real issues. And importantly for us, that experience of hate actually has an impact at a personal level, at a relationship level, at a community level, and at a societal level. And I want to spend a little bit of time thinking about that. Some of you may have read about the suicide of Dr. Nazim Mahmood in 2004. He was a young, successful doctor who was running a series of clinics across London, who decided to take his own life by jumping out of a building. A few days before that incident, he had told his mother that he was gay and that he was in a long-term relationship with a man. His mother's response was that you need to be cured of this. You need to go through a process of curing, otherwise we're going to cut you off. The threat of losing that relationship with his family inevitably turned to that experience of taking his own life. And that's what ends up happening if we don't challenge some of these. Hate turns inwards as well, and we must understand that experience. We will find out, I suspect, in due course. Caroline Fleck's death last weekend has again seen that experience of how hate can turn inwards. As importantly, hate operates at a societal level as well. Many of you will conclude I'm making a party political point here, but I am not. But what we're doing around reorganizing the way we pay welfare benefits is something that is actually causing real and long-term damage. The death of Errol Graham in Nottingham a few months ago is just the latest manifestation. This was a 57-year-old man who'd had long-term mental health problems, who when he was found was emaciated. He weighed less than 5 stone, and he died in a flat that had no food in it at all. His benefits had been cut because he'd failed to attend his usual session at the DWP office. And this is the situation we're creating. We're creating a context where we're actually saying there are some people who we do care about and we will protect, but there are others that we're not going to do. And I think that's the challenge we face when we start to address hate. And I think part of the solution has to be about building resilience. And that starting point has to be about building resilience with children and young people. We know we can never protect them from terrible things happening. But we also know that if we promote resilience, they will hopefully manage that experience and limit its long-term impact. And the work that Waltham Forest is doing by investing in strengthening families, strengthening communities, parenting education is part of that. But importantly, we need to make sure that the relationships that are around there are important. Our parenting program isn't identified as a program that builds cohesion, yet when parents sit down together and talk about what they want for their children, how they want their children to behave, what they want for their futures, they soon discover actually that what they all want is very similar. Happy, successful, well-behaved children are the things that we want. And by building those relationships, we'll really be having an impact. But we have to operate on that as a community level as well. The challenge that we face today is that if we don't operate at a community level, we will be divided and we will take that action. So an assembly like this, where we're actually taking the time to think about some of the challenges and how we work through, is part of that. But we need to operate at a societal level. I'm going to be kicked off in a second. We need to be operating at a societal level as well. We need our leaders to be saying it's not only sufficient to have the laws in place that allow us to challenge hate, but they actually need to live that in their lives as well. It's no longer good enough to be able to pillory some communities. It's no longer good enough to pick on the weak and say that for because of the life choices they made, we're not going to support them. So we need to take action. We need to build that resilience, and we need to hopefully work together to achieve it. Thank you very much for your time.